Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. We're so glad that you could join us on this very warm day in the northern Front Range of Colorado, topping 100 degrees today, but we're going to stay nice and cool and talk about everything lawns. My name is Allison O'Connor. I am the horticulture specialist here in Larimer County, and my co-pilots helping me today are Chris Hilgert, our State Master Gardener Coordinator and ornamental horticulture specialist, and also Cassie Anderson, who is in Adams County as the horticulture specialist. And I'll wait to introduce our two speakers after a couple of housekeeping things. So as a reminder, CSU is an equal opportunity access and non-discrimination university. If there's anything we can do to accommodate your needs, please let us know or visit our website for more information. This webinar is being recorded and we will post it to planttalk.org/webinars. We'll throw that into the chat so you can see previously recorded webinars and also what we have upcoming. This is a series that we do on the second Wednesday of the month at noon. And so we've had wonderful presentations all year and several still coming up in 2025. So you can register for upcoming webinars and also see what we have there. We will be closing down the chat, and so if you have any questions, please use the Q&A for any of the questions that you have. Chris, Cassie, and I will answer as many as we possibly can, and if we don't know the answer, we will toss it to Roch and Tony, who can then answer it live. Coming up in August, it's already August, at 12 p.m., join us on August 13th for the best of demo garden plants from the Western Slope with our colleague Molly. That will be really fun to hear about what's growing best on the Western Slope of Colorado and what you might be able to add to your garden. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to our two speakers today. We have Dr. Tony Koski, who is the Extension Turfgrass Specialist with Colorado State University, and his colleague Roch Gaussoin, who was a turfgrass extension specialist with the University of Nebraska, who is now retired. And between the two of them, they are going to lead us in a riveting and fun conversation about their 30-plus careers as turf specialists in the West and the Midwest. So take it away, Tony and Roch. Thank you for being here today.
Happy to be here.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for that introduction, Al. And Roch, especially, thank you for being here. As you can tell already, my voice is a little hoarse today. So kind of preemptively and just for fun, I asked my buddy Roch of, gosh, we've known each other, if you count graduate school, 40 years, I would say, between going to graduate school and being employed at different universities. And Roch's kind of like a brother by another mother to me. We've done so much together, best friends, best everything. So I really appreciate you being here, Roch, and this idea.
Anything for you, Tony. You know that.
Yeah, and I try to be the same way for you. It's a little harder.
Oh, you are, no doubt.
My way, but we kind of hatched this. Roch very graciously flew out to visit me last week, and it's like, hey, would you like to maybe join me and probably save my butt when it comes to my voice on this talk, because Roch being in Nebraska all those years and me being here, we deal with heat, we deal with changing temperatures. We're both extension specialists, so we see and hear a lot. We've experienced a lot, and so I thought it'd be fun to touch on this topic of how do you grow healthy landscapes. I always say landscape, we can stick turf in there, but everything's grown together. You got the trees and everything else is thrown in there. How do you keep these parts of our landscape healthy in these climate change times. When we do know, and we won't get into politics, but just those of us who are biologists, just watching over the years what's happened in our landscapes, just the types of weeds and insects and pest problems that we never saw in our respective states 10, 20, or 30 years ago when we first started doing this job. It's something's happening. Growing seasons are changing. It's letting us use grasses that we've never been able to even think about planting in a place like Nebraska or Colorado before. So stuff is changing. So how do we navigate those times? And maybe what kind of wisdom might we be able to, between Roch and me, present to you? So I want this to be kind of conversational, so I'll be asking Roch questions as we go through the talk today. I like to throw this picture in. This is a picture of this from my first turf conference here in Colorado after I came on the faculty. And I'll let you guess who is me and who is Roch. In the middle, the guy in the middle, I don't know if, I can't remember now if I got Larry Parati the link to this. Al, if you might want to be able to find a way to do that. I think Larry'd be happy joining us, but this shows how far back we go. My very first turf conference, I didn't know how to run the turf conference. I didn't know who to ask to speak. And so I just asked my friends. And it was still probably one of the best conferences that we've ever put on. And it's always been through our conferences. Every few years, I'd speak at Roch's conferences, and then he'd come and speak at ours. And of course, we've got all kinds of friends at other schools. And so it's this network of people we get to work with. When I say work, we call it work. It really isn't.
No, not at all.
Not at all. So
you did get rid of this picture, Tony, because of those glasses. Holy cow!
Yeah. Those glasses will make you come back, Roch. You'll be fat.
No, God, I hope not. They look like goggles, like I'm a minion.
Yeah. So I found that my way back photo album and wanted to share those pictures with me. And then in the middle, that's Larry Parati. A lot of you might know Larry. He's lived in Colorado forever, and has spoken at both of our turf conferences quite a bit. So our topic, changing climate. Whether you want to talk to that in terms of water, heat, drought. There's all kinds of ways people talk about changing climate. But there is a lot of concern, valid concern, especially in the western part of the United States, where water seems to be an ever-shortening supply. We get these calls for banning turf, having much more restricted green landscapes. And how do you explain that to people who either don't want to believe that there's changing climate happening, or how to use it to your advantage to provide grassing opportunities, especially for folks who they're having trouble because of this climate change thing, because of this heat, because of this lack of water. We've got better grasses for them. How do we lead them into a better place? Maybe subtly, and maybe by dazzling them with the beauty of some of these newer grasses. But I think it's something that all of us as turf specialists at universities have had to deal with, especially those of us in the Midwest and the Western U.S. So just a couple of the many examples you can find per week in newspapers and publications about whether grass is necessary, what kind of grasses to put in these landscapes, should we even be planting grass, that type of thing. So I'm not sure we'll change a lot of people's minds on that, but maybe we can give you a little bit of wisdom along the way that will help you make better decisions when you do have that opportunity to either build a new landscapes, create a new one, renovate your yard into some different species. Or maybe you've heard questions about, or got questions about a grass called Tahoma 31, or want to ask Rock insightful questions about buffalo grass. A lot of people don't know that University of Nebraska's got the #1 buffalo grass breeding program in the country and has for forever. And he can talk all things buffalo grass to you. So something that I always like to start these kind of talks out with, is to remind people that besides just being this nice green, soft stuff to play on for our dogs and our kids or ourselves, there are a lot of environmental, social benefits that lawns can provide us as individuals, as a community. Parks to play in, places for our dogs to play in. And a lot of times those benefits, they're ignored or they're unknown. People just don't think about them. They overlook them. Environmentally, a well-managed lawn can store more carbon than it takes to maintain it, which is kind of remarkable for many plant soil systems that we deal with. So that's just a reminder that besides just being nice places to play, if you like mowing your grass like Al, it's more than just a nice place to mow your grass. That there are some very real benefits that we as society and as individuals can gain from having green lawns and all the green plants that go with those green landscapes. So don't just write grass off as a passing fad. I had somebody ask me in an interview yesterday. Yeah, I'm still doing interviews, folks, at a radio show. Do you think we'll still have lawns 20 years from now? And I do think we will. I think they're going to look a whole lot different. I think our percentage of bluegrass lawns is going to be way different than the percentage of bluegrass lawns today. But we'll still have lawns. They're just going to look different. We're going to manage them differently. But we're still going to provide us these great values that a lot of times we don't give turf enough credit for. And just to give you some homework, or if you're more interested in it, seeing this trend happening about 10 years ago, Allison and a friend, a colleague in our department, Zach Johnson, and I wrote this paper on what we call the hidden value of landscapes. And it does talk about all these other aspects of landscapes that go unrecognized, but are very beneficial to us as individuals and as a society. So there's a URL. We don't have any hard publications of this, but it's a good read. It's science-based, but it's not boring at the same time. So I think you'll find it very useful if you're on the fence as to how much you value green landscapes in our society. I don't know if there's anything you want to add there, Rock, your experiences in Nebraska regarding these same kind of concerns about climate and water, heat.
We certainly have the concerns that others have, but at the same time, Nebraska is it's not an urban state, right? It doesn't have a Colorado, it doesn't have the large metro areas. So those agrarian agricultural roots tend to think about production. And so for the most part, we don't have as much of a pushback on lawns, maybe in the Omaha area, but there's never been any consideration in the Lincoln Grand Island area to limit lawn installation and stuff. That's pretty much a trademark of our landscapes is a central focus point of the lawn and really adapted ornamentals around it. We certainly have changed our recommendations over the last 35 years of what we would consider valid 30 years ago. We've backed off on other inputs, right? So resource conservation is the what direction lawns are going to go and continue to go. So I think you're right. I think 20, 40 years from now, long after we're gone, there's still going to be lawns. They may not be what we look at today, but they'll be there.
Yeah. Something else that I was thinking last night as I was putting this together, still doing it the old way, working at 3 a.m. to get the talk finished. But along with it's not just the grasses that might change, but we see changes in our spectrums of insect disease, weed problems, different irrigation needs. So we see responses from our irrigation companies to develop more water efficient water delivery systems. And we do see a demand for this newer grass, that the holy grail. I want a grass that stays green without water. That's a very common phone call that we get here.
And we don't want to mow. We don't, a lot of people say that I only have to mow once a month. So let's add that in there as well, Tony.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I don't want to mow it or fertilize it, all those type of things. And so I think what we're going to have to do is become more sophisticated landscape managers and attend education opportunities like this to learn what the new stuff is out there. So if you're at that point with a landscape where you have the opportunity to change to an alternative grass species, what's out there, what's available, what technology is available for me as a homeowner, how do I use it, what kind is worthwhile, which stuff is maybe not worth the investment. So we'll talk about some of those things as we go along today too. So just some examples, some things that I see changing in weed populations here in Colorado. We've got a group of weeds, we call them winter annuals. These are things that germinate in the fall. They grow or they stay green all winter and spring, and then they die. But something that I've seen is these things, they start growing well before winter in the fall. And we see them in our landscapes for much longer periods of time during the winter and in the spring, and they last longer in the fall. And it's like they're changing. These species are changing too, in response to our warmer falls and our earlier springs. So it's changing the weeds that we see, the weeds that we have to manage. Before we didn't pay a lot of attention to these, I think, as turf managers, but now that they become so prevalent that we just can't ignore them, and we see more herbicides being developed to address the management of these types of grasses. And one of the biggest ones in the western U.S. here is called cheatgrass or downy brome. and it's become a quite a noxious weed here in Colorado, and every year it seems to become more and more problematic, not just in our managed landscapes, but in our agricultural ones as well. And unfortunately, is a source for many of the wildfires that we see through uh, the urban western part of the country. And then we see different grasses growing that we never thought we'd see here. When I first moved to Colorado, I never saw goosegrass anywhere. And now it's getting to be darn near as common to see as a crabgrass in a lawn or a foxtail. So that's a super warm weather disease. And we do know that for it to become a problem and to complete its life cycle, you do need a pretty full growing season. So I don't, if you have any observations on differing weed problems that you've seen come up in Nebraska rock, just new species, things that you said, I never thought I'd see this in Nebraska before.
Yeah, one example, it's one of the sedges, false kalinga grass. We hadn't the first 20 years I was in Nebraska, we didn't have it. It tends to be, a more southern weed, much like goosegrass or southern United States across the entire band, right? And then all of a sudden we're seeing false kalinga, and we think originated from a sod shipment from Tennessee, but now there's 3 or 4 new developments that use the same sod from the same company, that are now just infested with false kalinga grass. But of course, the lawn care companies and the people in the garden stores aren't really familiar with that weed, so they start suggesting things that may or may not work. So it's really important to stay abreast of those kind of things and understand that things can go south over time, not quickly. It doesn't happen overnight, but we went from 1 or 2 yards showing, for example, false kalinga grass, and you don't have it in Colorado that I'm aware of. And then now probably several hundred lawns, and as that seed matures and it moves and that sort of thing, it'll become more prevalent in the things. And then I 100% on the goosegrass. When I first got to Nebraska, we had it, especially in heavily compacted areas on a golf course and sports fields. But now it just seems prevalent in parks and grounds, which we wouldn't have seen it before. But we've got these extended growing seasons with temperatures on the extreme ends, and those weeds are just taking advantage of that and adapting just like weeds do, right? So yeah, 100%, Tony. That's an observation that's really important, and how we control them. We usually say 1 and often 2 applications for crabgrass, but down in the southeastern section, we've actually had some golf courses that have started to use 3 applications of pre-emergent because they weren't getting season-long control.
Exactly, and a lot of the stuff that will control crabgrass won't touch goosegrass.
Right.
So that's the thing for our
Great point.
Our lawn care companies or homeowners, whoever, to be applying the correct products, because these grasses look so similar. You just can't call everything crabgrass and assume quote unquote crabgrass killer is going to kill that product. And so that's why we hear about quote unquote failure to control goosegrass. Well, you're using the wrong product, dummy. But it's because they don't know what they're even trying to control. So it's that continuing education thing to be able to identify these new species as they come along. Same thing with diseases. This is a disease that became an incredible pest. It's kind of on, I think breeders are developing resistant varieties of this, but just an example of a horrendous disease that came on suddenly in the turf world. And it came on so fast that we were caught with our pants down. but it was a very warm weather disease, and nobody knew what it was. It was just like it took a while for the scientific community, as good as we are, to develop number one, just to identify it, to understand why this disease, which is and you're a better pathologist than I, Rock, but this is a disease that's in rice. It's a rice problem that has jumped to perennial ryegrass. And so we've always got that opportunity. I don't know if it's an opportunity, but chance of species just jumping from one to another, and seemingly unrelated for unrelated reasons. But they tend to like to find certain of our turf species as attractive food sources. Another one that comes to mind is cranberry girdler, which is a cranberry insect problem, but also a problem in bluegrass lawns, especially here in Colorado. So you never know what kind of pest is the next thing that's going to be around the corner. Keeps our jobs certainly interesting, but also makes us always want to be on the lookout. So we do like it when folks bring something to our attention that says, this herbicide doesn't work anymore. And it gives us an opportunity to either examine it. Could be the herbicide's fault. Could be you've got a species you're trying to kill that herbicide won't work on. So lots of two-way learning opportunities here. Another one we're seeing more of here in Colorado, and I think anecdotally, even from surrounding states, I would talk about this disease at conferences, and I think, Rock, you folks in Nebraska, even being that close, would say, gosh, we really don't see that stuff here. And now it's not uncommon to see Ascochyta leaf blight in Illinois and Wisconsin and Minnesota and places that we really never thought we'd see it before. So there's something about this, the changing climate, that makes it easier for some of these disease problems to spread. And and this one, as bad as it looks, it's rarely deadly. But I'm waiting for the time, not with bated breath, but maybe of a time when Ascochyta becomes really a truly problematic disease, and is one that the turf doesn't recover from easily. We can generally get pretty good recovery here in Colorado, but we may get to the time when this becomes such an important plant killer that we'll have to take it more seriously as a more serious plant and turf disease.
Yeah, we see Ascochyta in Nebraska now. It's pretty prevalent across the entire state, and your list of things on that previous slide were spot on. I don't, it's never been fatal. I've never seen a lawn gone by it, but we do see it in lawns that are irrigated inefficiently or with systems that have broken heads or whatever. It's a pretty good diagnostic tool for bad irrigation distribution.
Yeah. And the best part of this disease are the names people come up with: neurotic ring spot or narcotic ring spot. It still always makes me laugh, even after hearing them 100 times. So, well, just in time, we'll skip over some of this, but just to show you how bad of a disease it is. Another one I'm seeing more of is a fairy ring. Used to be more of a curiosity, but this fungus, not really a turf disease, but it feeds on organic matter in our turf soils. I think because we're getting more rapid growth and more rapid accumulation of organic matter on our home lawns, we're seeing more opportunity for this this disease, if you will, to become a problem. And again, not truly a turf disease, but eventually you can kill the grass by other means. But I'm just seeing more of this, more of the mushrooms that kind of go along with the fairy ring. That if not because they kill the turf, they just worry people because of the concerns about them being poisonous in some cases. So seeing more of that. Here's the, here's fairy ring in progress. This is a cut section from a lawn where you can cut through into some of those dead sections. Put it in a plastic bag in your refrigerator where it's cool and moist, and you'll see this growth happening. And a lot of times that's from a fairy ring, which is difficult still for us to treat as even professional turf managers. Moving on to other pest problems, I'm seeing more earthworm problems, lumpy lawns, if you will, and night crawlers. I think that goes along with we're watering these lawns more because it's drier and it's hotter. Night crawlers love the moisture, and so we're encouraging them with this extra moisture, and so more and more cases of what we call lumpy lawn syndrome caused by these night crawlers. Do you see a lot of this in Nebraska? Or maybe you don't know, Roch has since moved to North Carolina, so he's learning turf management all over again. But are you seeing this other places you go, Roch?
We've always had I think because we're already so moist to begin with, at least in the eastern part of the state, we're at 38 inches of precip. So we've seen, serious earthworm issues, I guess. But, they are beneficial in a number of ways, but their burrows and stuff can be unsightly and cause the bumpiness in the yard and scalping in the yard and that sort of thing. So many people want to find a way to at least deter them in some way. And they're also the number one feed of moles. So if you have a lot of earthworms, you're probably going to have a lot of moles as well because they're going to move in and it's going to be like a smorgasbord of worms for them. And that's kind of their number one feeding thing is earthworms. So if you have a lot of earthworms, chances are you're also going to be a great attractant for moles. So there's a number of reasons to think about trying to not eradicate them because most things are not labeled for it. But anything you can do to deter it. Sometimes just filling back in the hole and dragging it back in the things will get it or back off the water a little bit. And sometimes those earthworms will migrate on their own.
Exactly. And I think something else that's encouraged them is our encouragement of returning grass clippings to lawns. I think grass clippings are like cotton candy for night crawlers. And so they really they love those lawns where we recycle grass clippings. Not that we want to discourage that, but they do like those grass clippings. So another thing I think encourages them, at least out here in the western U.S., is our higher soil pHs. And night crawlers favor that over the more acidic pHs. So we have that going for us here in Colorado. I'm fumbling for a pill here, folks.
Well, as you indicate on this slide, Tony, we tend to be acidic in eastern Nebraska, and as we get closer to Colorado, obviously higher pH, and we also have soils that lend them the loamy sands and stuff lend themselves to great earthworm populations. But once we get into really the sandier, coarser soils, earthworms don't really like that, right? So sometimes it's, that's why you sometimes see them on golf greens, but it's usually another species. But if you've got sand, they have trouble burrowing through it and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's earthworms can be a problem. But question mark pesticides, most earthworms don't really react to pesticides in a way that you're hoping for. Plus, most of them aren't labeled for specifically for control of earthworms.
Right, right. Yeah, we don't like to recommend the pesticides. The closest that you can get is there are these repellents now, um, very expensive fertilizers, basically we call them, that contain seed meal. And this will discourage the night crawlers, um, irritates their bodies. They come to the surface, they die by desiccation or robins having an all-you-can-eat smorgasbord. Um, so, but that's an expensive way, but it is a way, especially on golf courses, as you mentioned, Roch, that there's some level of management, but they'll never call this a pesticide because they don't have to go through all the EPA rigmarole to get it labeled as such.
It's not much of a fertilizer with only 1% nitrogen, though, Tony, right?
Yeah, exactly. Got to apply a lot of it to get the earthworm control. Something else that we've been seeing more of is in the springs here are grass mites. With warm, dry winters, we get grass mite problems like you wouldn't believe, and this can be very lethal. Again, difficult to control because we don't have really good miticides that work on the mites that we see in turf. So we'll often this time of year, well, earlier now, but we've gone through that period where we see the mite injury phase of the spring, but more and more of that as we get these warmer, drier winters. So that means winter watering. So that's a changing of our understanding of how to manage a lawn in a warmer, drier climate. Then we get more exotic insects. We've had Japanese beetle in the United States since the early 1900s, but it's moving. And I'm not sure if it's because of warmer temperatures, just, worse recognition of it as a problem or recognizing it as futile. We're still trying to keep it out of Western Colorado where the peaches are grown. But it seems to be moving more quickly into places than we thought we'd never see it before. So I'm sure there's some kind of a weather relationship there.
I think one of the theories, Tony, is the changing weather patterns have changed how thermals work, right? And so, the matures can get further west because we didn't have Japanese beetle in Nebraska of any merit, right? It was there, but I can't even remember. I think it was in the 40s or whatever the first time it was documented. But now we have it. I mean, it's a major target of pest control specialists and that sort of stuff because it is, and it's just deadly on roses and some of the other ones, but it's also deadly. And then they feed as adults, right? But I think it has something to do with their flight patterns, and that's changed, at least that what I've read. That's been speculated, but I don't know if that's been documented. But they're a pretty little beetle, but man, they're a pain in the butt.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. I hadn't heard that about the flight patterns, but yeah, is air movement and those big storms, um, all that kind of stuff changes. It can move tremendous amount of insects, and people don't think about hurricanes moving insects like that, but they do. Thankfully we do have some pretty good biocontrols for these, especially for the Japanese beetles, so we don't have to resort to the more harsh, I guess you would say, chemical products. But even then, the synthetic ones we have now are or what I would call more gentler products. So we've got 4 of these. We've got better control options, but anytime we can get away without using a control option, that's always better because these things cost money. So, oh, here's the Celiprin, which is a very low toxicity, um, great option for the white grubs and bill bugs. A little bit spendy, but if you don't want to use the traditional harsh insecticides for your white grub problems, Acelyprin is one, and I recommend this after the natural organics. Once people can't get the organics anymore because there's so much demand for them, then we kind of resort to this one.
Well, the beauty of this product of Celiprin, there you get another picture of it. It's a little bit pricey. I thought I was gonna say it's a little bit pricey, but the beauty of it is that army worms have become a problem in central and a little bit to the west, but mostly to the east, Nebraska. And if you've got a Celiprin down for grubs and you follow the directions, it's there for fall armyworm control. And we didn't have, when we didn't have a Celiprin as a possible use product, and then we had that unsuspecting, once again because of weather patterns and stuff, the fall armyworm showed up in Nebraska, and it was just devastating. And it was especially devastating to turf type tall fescue, which we consider to be less prone to grub damage because of its extensive root system. But it was cotton candy, like you said earlier, for tall fescue. And it kind of left the bluegrass alone if there was tall fescue present. So this was it's a synthetic insecticide and certainly has some desirable characteristics of the ones we used to use, but you're still applying a synthetic insecticide. But it works
Yeah,
for fall armyworm as well.
it's one that doesn't have a caution, warning, or danger. So
Right.
it's PPE. It's wear socks and shoes. So don't go barefoot applying this to your lawn. But we have noticed, I think, anecdotally, that with um, the cranberry girdler, that with our applications of this in the spring for Japanese beetle, that we may be getting cranberry girdler control in the fall. So
With a
kind of
Celiprin?
yeah, with the Celiprin.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
So that's kind of similar to what you're seeing with the armyworm. Well, I thought I'd throw this one in because you have just to scare the bejesus out of people, Rock, um, but also to show them how close this is. And we won't spend a lot of time on it. And Allison probably hates me putting this number out there because people are going to be calling every earthworm they see now. Cassie and Allison will be getting phone calls. Is this Asian jumping worm? But this is an example of, again, if it was an insect that can just blow up out of nowhere. This started up in the northeastern United States, and now it's just blossomed throughout the country. And the closest it is to Colorado is indeed in Nebraska.
Yep.
This is from one of your educational materials from Nebraska from your great entomologist. I forget her name, but
Jody?
yeah, Jody. Yeah. So, just something else to be on the lookout. And, sitting next to each other, they look very different. You say, well, those are different. But if you don't have them next to each other, easy to confuse Asian jumping worm with the regular night crawlers. So, not to scare you, but this is one that's coming. Do you have this one in North Carolina? I forgot to look at that map.
Yeah, the Southeast has kind of avoided them as well, right? But that big white band on the left of that jumping worm there, it's not always that prevalent either. Because I've seen, and they're fishermen love them because they're no longer allowed to put them into, bait cans. But for the longest time, because as you can imagine, they've got some sort of muscular structure and they can be pretty active when they're put on the end of a fish hook, more so than than a European night crawler. So they give pretty good action, and so the fishermen like them as well. And that's kind of one of the reasons, along with their adaptation to warmer climates, that why we're seeing why we saw a lot of jumping worms in Nebraska, more so than we would have anticipated in such the short amount of time when they became prevalent in the up the Northeast.
Oh, yeah. So this shows this shows where they are in Nebraska. They got a ways to get to Colorado, but kind of like with emerald ash borer, it just takes one container of these in a fisherman's pickup truck to move it from Omaha to Fort Collins. So it's something to be on the lookout for. Other animals, rabbits. So we've always had rabbit problems in Fort Collins or in Colorado, but nothing like we see them now. And they're tame. They're almost belligerent. They own the landscape, not you. Um, and we're just seeing lots of them. A lot of it's cyclical, but we contribute this to a lot to fewer predators. Although now we've got HOAs where no dogs and cats are allowed, and so that helps the rabbits. But just not enough owls and hawks around to take care of these. But they certainly do cause severe turf damage. And when I first started, again, telling colleagues about this 15, 20 years ago at other turf conferences, they thought I was goofy, that rabbits could cause problems in lawns. But they are an ever emerging, ever increasing problem. Roch, you mentioned voles or moles before. We don't get moles in Colorado.
Lucky
Maybe,
you.
yeah, maybe once or twice, one or two in a stray far eastern border county. But our big problem are voles. And so they're after grubs and earthworms, but mainly just roots and shoots of plants. And with the warmer climates, and plus us building these perfect landscapes to house them, voles have become a huge problem for us. So, and it's not just a turf problem. They cause problems for junipers. They girdle a lot of our shrubs in our landscapes. Here are roses that have been totally girdled by voles. So yes, a turf problem with their tunneling, but lots of other landscape plants are damaged by these. And you can see here's the vole trails in the middle of the summer, which we never used to see a whole bunch of this before, and now it's very common to see vole problems right in the middle of the summer, whereas before it was more, coming out of winter. For maybe 5 or 6 weeks, we see some vole problems. So they're going to be much more problematic as well. And so there's pretty easy control measures, just putting out a live trap. You don't even have to bait it. This is my colleague, Zach Johnson. He puts these out in his yard here in Fort Collins, and some weeks he'll get 10 voles a week without even having to bait the trap. That's how dumb these voles are. Something that we found that can work against both rabbits and voles because of the odor is heavy applications of mill organite. And it's a lot, but it's using the turf application Eventually, you reach the point where you start applying more nitrogen than that turf really needs. But this can be at least short term, a pretty valid and effective way of repelling rabbits and voles from your landscape. Now, I want to jump to species selection here because I'm of the opinion here in Colorado anyway that most of our turf problems are related to management. And a good chunk of that is related to the grass species that you either chose to plant or the person who owned that property first decided to plant. And you're stuck with that species. So anytime you get a chance to improve the species, that could be through overseeding, through a total renovation, resodding. Take time to look at those alternatives, the possibilities that are out there that might make lawn care a whole lot easier for you in the future. So species selection is a huge part, enormous part of preventing and managing lawn problems. So it's not uncommon to see questions like this. What's happening to my lawn? We're getting more and more of these more frequently. And this is almost always a lawn watering problem. Allison and I wrote this fact sheet on how to do a little self-audit on your lawn, just for no other reason to prove that these brown areas are because of poor sprinkler coverage. And it just shows you can have these collection cups just a couple feet away and get twice as much water in one spot as another. Irrigation heads aren't perfect. Spacing isn't. Pressure isn't. So do your maintenance on your irrigation systems. But given the opportunity, there are grasses that you can plant that will be more tolerant of these skips in irrigation. And you might want to consider taking advantage of some of those more drought-resistant species.
Tony, one of the things, I love this example here about using an irrigation audit. And I went through the certified irrigation audit training in California a number of years ago, and we did a bunch of audits. And people were like reluctant to do that. Oh no, I think it's a disease, like you mentioned already, right? But what we found is like, well, when you get a really good rain, what happens to those brown spots? Especially if it's bluegrass, right? And they're like, well, they come back, and they're like, well, maybe your irrigation system, maybe you should do an audit, because we had trouble convincing people to do audits. They just thought it was a lot of work for something that they didn't think was the problem, right? So half the battle for irrigation audits, in my humble opinion, is getting people to do it. And once they do it and realize how inefficient the system is, as you um, very astutely told in that previous slide, and in this after picture right here, shows exactly what is going on. That it's simply a water distribution problem. So good on you for doing that, because I don't think we do it enough.
Yeah, we get more thank yous from people about this. And again, but it was always, I didn't think that this was going to tell me anything, and it did. And so it's still a battle to get people to do, especially professional turf managers, that are doing audits. Their idea of doing an audit is turning the system on in the spring, and all the heads come up. And in their mind, their audit is done at that point.
And maybe they're hitting where they're supposed to, right?
Yeah, or close. Yes.
Close enough.
Again, just some pictures of before and afters of irrigation audit, but people in the worst way want to say that's disease, and usually it's water. So as far as watering goes, I encourage people to watch the lawn, look for signs of water drought stress, a little bit of browning, a little bit of graying around the edges, footprinting, that type of thing. And run the system as long as you can without getting runoff. And then don't water again until you see the footprinting. That keeps filling that root zone up with usable water. It's something you don't have to think about, but you do have to pay attention to the lawn. So look for those signs, water when the turf needs it. Then again, put as much water on as you can, but we don't want to see this. We don't want to see water running off of the lawn. So do soak cycling to get that water into the turf as deeply as possible. Then don't water it again until you see footprinting. So I call that simple. It isn't simple because you got to pay attention to your lawn, but if you really do care about it, you will do those things. Then if you're a little bit lazier, you want to be more automated, there's these good tools from the irrigation companies that'll kind of automate your system, soil moisture sensors. You can install these yourselves. You can get somebody professional to do it. You have to have some calibration. They're only kind of as smart as the person who's installing them, but they can be very useful tools for reducing irrigation in your landscape and refining it. You get your own weather stations for your houses now, so take advantage of this emerging technology. It can really make you a more frugal water user for sure. Here's one of my favorite controllers. This is one called the Rachio. This is from the a company, the Rachio company in Denver. More expensive than most of these systems, but gives you great control over your system and very water efficient. It has a water sense certification from the federal government, so very good water system. They've also got leak detectors that are pretty cool. They'll tell you where in your irrigation system you have a leak, if you do indeed have one. So take advantage of this great technology. Finally, this is where we get to the grass selection. I wanted to put this last because we get hung up on it too much, but it is important. We do have that opportunity to do the new landscape. Have something besides more than just lawn. Sorry. Have it say lawn in that landscape. You want to think about the grass that you're going to be putting in there. So do your homework. This is a grass you're going to be married to for maybe your next wife for longer than that. So if you want a less stress-free life, choose that grass wisely. Talk to people that do this for a living. Get a good landscape design, not only for the lawn part, but also for the rest of the trees in that landscape. People always ask, what's the best grass to plant? Years ago, the choice was bluegrass or buffalo grass.
Go ahead.
Buffalo grass or turf type tall fescue. What was that, Rock?
I was going to say, if you want me to take it, that you would look like you're having trouble getting
why don't you go for a few slides? Let me catch my breath.
Okay, sounds good. So Kentucky bluegrass was king or queen, depending upon your perspective, in both Nebraska and Colorado. And then we saw this movement of turf type tall fescues coming in, and those got improved genetically. Then of course in Nebraska we've exploited the genetic potential for buffalo grass to be a good warm season grass for and it's one of the few true natives to the Americas. And then there's an interesting one that Tony's done a fair amount of work with is Bermuda grass. That one we would not, we've struggled with Bermuda grass, even some of the more cold tolerant ones in Nebraska, and we're not sure why. But when you look at the desirable character, there is no perfect grass. Tony and I say that all the time to our clients, both professional and otherwise, consumers as well. But when we get into when we look at the right of this graph, buffalo grass, blue grama, Bermuda grass, these are warm season grasses, so they have a very different requirement. They do better in the sun, they do better under heat and drought conditions. And then when we get to like the other side of the spectrum on the left, the Kentucky bluegrass, annual bluegrass, and rough bluegrass. Now that's not to say that we're talking about consumptive water use to keep them green and actively growing. Bluegrass has a remarkable capacity to go dormant, unlike many of the grasses that the cool season grasses that we talk about. And then somewhere in the center, there's these tall fescue, perennial rye, the Texas hybrid, and then the fine fescues. And at least in Nebraska and in my limited experience in Colorado, lawns are dominated by bluegrass or tall fescue. But Tony's work, along with some of his colleagues, is showing that Bermuda grass has some possibilities because it's a more traditional looking um, warm season grass than it is for others. And when we think about, you know, transition zone, we've got the cool season grasses in the north, obviously, warm season grasses in the south, and then there's a transition zone where you can kind of grow a little of both, and Colorado falls a little bit in there, but there's a lot of grasses out there that can bring something to the table. But I really think you want to talk about like Bermuda grass because it's showing some great potential, and we're skipping through these relatively quickly. But there's grasses that we don't normally consider, but we wouldn't consider them based on climate 30, 40, maybe even 20 years ago. But we get into the weather patterns that we're showing and are going to continue based on climate projections, and also the extremes of winter. Winters are more extreme, summers are more extreme. So we have something that has that balance of both, and the plant breeders have done a nice job moving towards other grasses. I'm not sure why you paused here, Tony.
Well, yeah, I cruised through some of them mainly because of time, but I wanted to mention some that people don't think about. So we're getting a lot of use of wheatgrass now in parks here in Colorado. It's not absolutely the prettiest grass, but it can tolerate parks might, it can tolerate, casual soccer games, certainly just the average use a park would get. But people are putting these more into their home lawns as well. Very, very cold tolerant grasses, very drought tolerant. These are natives. So there is the thing, certain parts of the country, people like to use native plants in their landscapes, and so we like to give people options, and so certainly consider stream bank and western wheatgrasses as an option. Consider um, some of the more improved, like Roch said, Kentucky bluegrass has a relatively low water use rate. It just needs water more frequently to stay green. On the other hand, tall fescue has a high water use rate. And when it runs out of water, it's a goner. So you have to understand the intricacies, and besides just the water use rate, which seed companies can kind of bamboozle you with. So we've got great cool season grasses, and again, 20 years from now, we'll still be seeing some of those in home lawns. But the warm season grass species, if you're thinking about Colorado, it's not a real long list. We can't use St. Augustine and most of the zoysias and and centipede and bahia, stuff that those of you from the south might be used for. But we do have buffalo grass, and if we had more time, we could talk more about that. But any buffalo grass worth talking about, as far as using it in the home lawn, has come out of the Nebraska breeding program. That might be saying not giving Milt Engelke at Texas A&M enough credit, but that's okay. He gives himself enough credit as it is. So, well, what's always been the barrier against that, and it's always been kind of this winter color thing. But now that I'm still trying to find a company that'll take me up on this, is using the winter colorants uh, on buffalo grass lawns up here, and I know down by you, Rock, Bermuda grass, they're starting to colorize, especially on golf courses. Pinehurst colorizes their entire golf course for the winter, instead of doing an overseeding of cool season grasses. So there are answers to the short green season concerns about some of these warm season grasses. And are you seeing more of that, or you're going to have to teach more of that down there in North Carolina, where you'll be doing at least still some turf teaching, I'm thinking.
Yeah, they're painting or pigmenting, especially on the golf course, because the whole overseeding operation adds a whole other level of cost, and it's not a good transition. It's hard to go from ryegrass to from Bermuda grass to ryegrass and then back to Bermuda grass very effectively. And superintendents are doing it, but there's a little bit of time when the play isn't really very good. So from a golf course perspective, they've gone, because nothing rolls like dormant Bermuda grass, right? So and
Yep.
and especially with the changes in climate, we see a protracted or a longer green season, at least in North Carolina and the Southeast, because they tend to come out of dormancy quicker and they go into dormancy later than they historically have because of an extended growing season. And I think that's going to be true in, like in Colorado. I think you see earlier, um, earlier planting dates, and we've changed zones and all these, plant adaptation zones. This change is real, and it's something that we either adapt to or struggle with some of our older um, conceptions or older perceptions of what's actually going on.
Yeah, and as those climates do change, and we're allowed, if you will, to plant some of these more formerly thought not winter hardy grasses, um, when they do stay dormant going into a winter, and they do try to come out of winter earlier, that can cause winter injury problems.
Exactly right.
It just takes one night, one bad night in Charlotte to get a lot of Bermuda grass setback, if not kill. So there's a fine line there. We've got these very promising grasses, but how far north do we push them? And same with some of the cool season ones. There are people in the south who want to use these cool season grasses farther south. How far south do you try to push, tall fescue or uh, those hybrid Kentucky bluegrasses? Something. If you want a quick rocket, or maybe there isn't a quick answer. Why do you think buffalo grass never really caught on the way that maybe the U.S. Gulf Association, uh, the sod growers, University of Nebraska, all of us turf nerds thought it might catch on, as a kind of a holy grail or alternative to bluegrass? Or what? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that your slide here shows that people like winter color, or at least fall and spring color. And the other thing is that they managed it like bluegrass. They over irrigated it. They put too much fertilizer on it. They tried to manage it like they were managing bluegrass or even tall fescue, and they failed. And a lot of really large installations and stuff, kind of went south because they had sprinkler systems installed, which we would have never recommended. And so then they over irrigated them because somebody set a timer and walked away. So it was lack of knowledge. We probably didn't do as good a job on the front end of describing the benefits, including being a native that we did, but it didn't really catch on. But it still is prevalent in the transition zone and the more arid Southwest.
Yeah, yeah. So there are still good varieties out there. I always tell people if you're gonna, do buffalo grass from seed, Sundancer is still by far the best variety. That's a Nebraska.
It's
Um,
a Nebraska product, and it's clearly superior in all turf characteristics and management regimes and that sort of stuff. But we'll have one coming out probably next year. Keenan Admonson, who's our plant breeder, has got one it's an improvement over Sundancer, and it also on the front end of it yields better seed, so the price should come down because it's got a healthy price on it, right? So, but if you're going to plant any seeded buffalo grass, it has to be Sundancer. That's clearly the most um, appropriate for a home lawn.
what are your feelings on like Prestige and Legacy, your vegetative varieties? Do you still strongly encourage them, or are they kind of on the periphery now?
Well, I think they're more in the periphery because I think we'll have some other vegetative ones. They're still available. You can even get the plugs online, and a lot of the more native, companies will purchase Legacy and Prestige plugs, and we suggest that you plant them by plugs. If you try to sod it, it can sod, but it's relatively expensive, and you can have full cover. In Colorado, Utah, if you plant it on plugs on 8 to 10 inch centers. And by the end of the year, you've got a pretty good lawn. Weed control during that time is a little bit problematic, but once you get it established, and we have lawns that have been in for 15, 20 years that have been Prestige and Legacy, that after the second year, they're doing nothing but mowing and a pre-emergent in the spring. And a little bit of fertilizer every couple of years, and they are maintaining a pretty healthy lawn, an appropriately looking lawn. But once again, they're dormant after the first frost, and then they don't green up readily in the spring. So if that's what must need is for you, then the buffalo grasses aren't the right choice. But if you want a low water user, highly adapted native species, you really only have buffalo grass as a choice.
Right, right. And when I talk people through the plugging process, but I also encourage them to go online and get a bottle of quinclorac and
Yes.
Quicksilver. Do the broadleaves and the annuals, and I've led people through like perfect plug conversions with those two herbicides.
Yeah, it's a great recommendation, Tony, and that works really well. And if you're gonna, what you're doing is you're making an investment in a lawn that is ultimately going to be extremely low maintenance and high quality, relatively high quality. Um, but the management on the front end is a little more specialized and a little more intense than you would consider for just throwing out bluegrass or tall fescue seed and kind of walking away, right?
Exactly, exactly. Um, Kind of related to that, we've seen a lot of success here in Colorado with blue grama. We don't have any really good turf type blue gramas, but these are kind of converting to kind of like a little semi prairie. We see a lot of this with HOAs. This is an HOA that Alice and I worked with to convert from bluegrass um, to blue grama. Again, our biggest battle with these folks is getting them to turn the water off and to avoid mowing. Um, so once we can get people trained up properly onto maintaining them, they're going to be a lot happier with them. But we've had some wild success with converting to native blue grama. Here's what it looks like over irrigated and over planted, but certainly it's a beautiful grass, and that the unmowed part there is probably about knee height on the right side of that beauty band next to the sidewalk.
Well, you know what, Tony, the blue grama and buffalo grass make a great mix because you get the kind of the more sod forming capability of one over the other, and we have a lot of lawns in central and western Nebraska that are blue grama, primarily a variety called Hachita, and then one of our improved buffalo grasses. So that's a great choice.
Yeah, Hachita is our favorite one. Yep. Something that surprises is how adaptable little bluestem is to mowing. And this is another HOA down in Denver that intentionally seeded little bluestem and mowed it as a lawn, which is a very unique look, especially in the fall. The fall color of little bluestem is unique anyway, and to have it in a mowed lawn is pretty cool. So that's another one to consider, but it makes a pretty nice, fairly dense, low maintenance, and I think just a cool looking lawn alternative. And again, it's a native. People like native. And let's just say a few words here on Bermuda grass now. What about this as a replacement? Absolutely beautiful grass. It's the sports turf grass of the South, and beginning to get that reputation in the North now with these more winter hardy varieties. But there's so many attributes of Bermuda grass. People say, well, this is a no-brainer. Heat tolerant, likes the brightest light possible, drought resistant, low nitrogen requirement. It sounds like a wonder grass, but the problem with it always has been is winter hardiness, borderline winter hardiness, especially with anything that was a hybrid. But then a number of years ago, out of Oklahoma State University, we started seeing at first some seeded Bermudas that were winter hardy, and now have some just gorgeous vegetative varieties that can be sprigged or plugged or sodded. Makes the turf is so dense, you get very few weeds, fewer insect problems, very good salt tolerance that's good when it comes to dog urine, good traffic tolerance. So for that backyard with the kids and the dogs, some great tolerances there. The one I'm currently recommending is Tahoma 31. Now this is a hybrid that you cannot get seed for, so you have to sod it, or sprig it, or plug it. So there are a few Bermudas seeded ones out there that can give you a pretty good quality turf, because this is the real high quality stuff. And this is where you start calling around sod farms, looking and specifically asking for Tahoma 31. It's a cross between two different cultivars, and so it's a mule. It's a sterile mule, but just makes a beautiful lawn. Again, no maintenance, but you can mow it probably once every couple of weeks. Probably fertilize it here as a home lawn once a year, maybe twice. Those first couple of years, you can tolerate a low mowing height, and just beautiful grass. The one maintenance chore you get added onto it is you're going to have to do dethatching or power rake with this grass. It does accumulate thatch pretty aggressively, and I can see lawns that aren't managed properly from a thatch perspective. We'll start seeing problems with dry spots and that type of thing. So there's going to be a learning curve with managing these grasses too, but certainly these are alternatives. I know there's another one called Texoma coming out. That's a relative to this. That's supposed to be even better than Tahoma 31. So be on the lookout for those better varieties. Just some pictures just from Denver of neighboring lawns. The green is the Tahoma. The one on the right is Kentucky bluegrass. So you can see there is a difference in drought, heat, and stress tolerance. I'm going to skip over zoysia. Too much to talk about. The last thing we're doing a lot of these conversions in these HOAs to truly kind of back to native, what it was like before we lived here, selecting parts of HOAs to do that with, and able to do that successfully. Maybe not something you want to do in every every urban backyard, but we're having some success with large HOAs. Can look very different, can look very attractive. If it's not managed properly, not mowed properly, again, here's that blue grama shouldn't have been mowed, but they're mowing it just because human beings have that mowing gene in them that makes them want to mow. I don't get it, but if we can get people to mow these native areas more reasonably, I think people enjoy them, and we'll start to see wildflowers come into them, and people will value them a whole lot more than maybe they value them now. But yeah, the mowing creates a mess and a disposal problem. So this is where some of the management, this is where there's a lot of education has to still occur. So we ask, when you're considering doing a change from a new species to another, have the opportunity, ask all these questions. Roch alluded to these at the beginning. Make sure you pick the right grass for your particular lawn, or if you're on an HOA committee and you're making this big decision, this is going to fit the needs of as many of your residents as possible. So put a lot of thought into it, because it's a major decision. I know we're way over time. Usually I'd be getting scolded by Allison and Cassie and Chris by now, but hopefully you gave us a little grace. I apologize my catching my voice, and my voice has been off a little bit today, so appreciate your patience with that, folks. But it's been great having you partner with me on this Roch.
Thanks for the opportunity, Tony.
Anytime we can do this, or even better, go fishing.
Yeah,
we'll take the time to do this.
No doubt.
Well, thanks everyone. Roch, thank you for being on. Love you, brother. I don't know if you have anything you want to say at the end here.
No, just there's amazing things going on in Colorado, Tony, and you've been a huge part of it. So you should be pretty proud of the turf management expertise that exists in the state of Colorado due to your dedication to the homeowners, the professionals on up and down, the other extension specialists. So good on you, buddy.
Thanks for joining us today. Remember, we're doing this once a month on the second Wednesday. Next month, we'll hear about the best demo plants from the Western Slope. Roch, Tony, thank you. It was an absolute pleasure, and we will get this recorded. Hats off to both of you.